Thank you for listening to Dell's Dynamic Music Podcast. I'm your host, DJ Dell 523. Today we're going to be talking about the band Cameo. In 1974, Cameo started out as a 14-member band created by Larry Blackman, and they were called the New York City Players. Signed by Casablanca Records to its Chocolate City imprint in 1976, the group soon changed its name to Cameo after their manager informed them that there was already a band called the New York City Players. Prior to this, Blackman, keyboardist Gregory Johnson, and the late Gwen Guthrie formed the band East Coast together, with James Wheeler on alto saxophone, Melvin Way on bass, Michael Harris on percussion, and Harris Fry, also known as Pat Grant, on trombone. They released one self-titled album in 1973 on the independent label Encounter. Cameo started with deep funk sound, but it was obvious from their start their sights were set on the dance floor. Their first album was Cardiac Arrest, which featured its first hit single, Rigor Mortis. Ugly Ego, We All Know Who We Are, and Secret Omen contained dance floor songs such as I Just Wanna Be and Find My Way, the latter which was a major disco smash and was included on the Thank God It's Friday soundtrack. By the time Cameosis came out in 1980, it had reached 25 on the Billboard Top 200, and it was in their greatest position ever. Cameo had gained considerable momentum in the charts through those recent releases. Albums such as 1981's Knights of the Sound Table and 1982's Alligator Woman saw the band playing their eclectic style. The latter album reached 23 compared to their former releases, 44, which did not spawn a major single, while performing Cameosis for the highest charting album in the Billboard Hot 100 at that point. However, Alligator Woman single failed to reach the top 100 and only charted in the top R&B charts, reaching 54. The band released She's Strange in 1984, which performed well and hit 26 on the Billboard 200. The album also contained the single, which became the band's first Billboard Hot 100 track, excluding Bubbling Under, hitting 47 on the chart with She's Strange. In 1985, the album Single Life, featuring the track Attack Me With Your Love, hit number 3 on the top R&B charts and continued the band's momentum, paving the way for what was to come the following year. The single Word Up hit the radios in mid-1986 and reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, thus becoming their highest charting single. The album also hit number 8 and number 1 on the Billboard 200 and the top R&B charts respectively, becoming their highest charting album. 2 years later, Cameo released Machismo to mixed critical reviews and dropped to the charts at number 10 and 56 on the top R&B and Billboard 200 respectively. Cameo then followed that up with 1990's Real Men Wear Black and 1992's Emotional Violence, both which failed to reach the charts. The previous release was followed by 2 compilation albums in between the time of their next recordings. In 1994, In the Face of Funk was released on the band's independent label and hit 10 on the top R&B chart. This album was followed by a 6-year unofficial hiatus with several compilation releases until the next album, Sexy Sweet Thing, in 2000. The album hit 64 on the top R&B chart and is their most recent charting release. In 2001, the band was featured in Mariah Carey's single Loverboy, which was based on the band's single Candy. The song hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and was co-written by Blackman. These years saw a great period of inactivity and unofficial hiatus for the band, in which time 6 compilation albums were released. Blackman is thought to own the band's moniker regardless of the activity within the band at any given time, and thus virtually is always active. The compilation albums released in this period were, in chronological order, The Hits Collection in 2000, 20th Century Masters, The Millennium Collection, The Best of Cameo, Anthology, Classic Cameo, The Best of Cameo, Gold, and the Definitive Collection. In March 2016, Cameo began a year-long Las Vegas residency show at the Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino. On February 20th, 2019, Blackman announced the upcoming release of El Paso, the first Cameo single in 19 years. The release failed to chart. Aaron Mills continues to tour with Cameo as well as other artists. He has worked with Outkast, playing on their singles Miss Jackson and Prototype, among other tracks. Ex-Cameo vocalist John Kellogg became an entertainment lawyer, representing such artists as as the OJs, the late Gerald Levert, and LSG. He also pursued a career in the music industry higher education, becoming an assistant chair of the Music Business Management Department at Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts. Gregory B. Johnson has released 2 CDs on his own label, Allspice Records Company. In 2007, A New Hip, which is a smooth jazz CD, and in 2012, Funk, Just for a Little Time, an urban funk CD. So there you have it. That's a little bit about Cameo in terms of a historical biography, if you will. As for me, Cameo was a band that I grew up listening to. My dad had all their albums, so growing up I heard a lot of that, and to me they were a great band. Now, up until my late teens, early 20s, I wasn't really aware of their early music, but I was always aware of stuff basically from the Word Up album on. It was great music, it really was. I mean, it's funny because that whole time period, whether you're talking about the late 70s on into the 80s, it was just a different time. And I mean, looking at movies and stuff now, you can look at the way people dress in that, and yeah, it might be kind of funny now. We might share a good laugh about the clothing styles and that, but there was something about that time period that was really catchy. And I mean, not only did you have bands like them where they were self-contained bands, and we're going to talk about some rock bands and that in future episodes because I love all types of music, so we're not just going to stick strictly with R&B, even though for my radio show that is what I play. I do listen to all types of music. I have a ton of music, so we can talk about a lot of different stuff. But one of the things that I liked about that era, bands truly were bands. I mean, a lot of times these bands would have 10 pieces, you know what I mean? There'd be 10, 15 members to the band, all playing a different instrument. You had your background vocalist, etc. And it really made a difference on the sound. Now, when you look at later Cameo albums, later on in their career, there were less people in the band. And that was the one thing that could be noted as well. As time went on, a lot of bands that started off as big outfits, so to speak, ended up downsizing. Even a group like Earth, Wind & Fire, which is a group that I'll be talking about later weeks because they were also a band that I really enjoyed, went from having a ton of guys there to basically being a band of 5 to now being a band of 3. Although they still have the backing artists playing behind them, like, you know, the guitar players, etc. But the main band itself was a lot bigger than what it is now. And that was a trend from the 70s on, where you had a lot of bands that had a lot of people who were part of the band, and that was a big thing. And I mean, to me, it's one of the things that I've talked to people about, and that is the fact that when you look at schooling, one of the things that's different is because, I mean, I'm not as old as some people, but I'm old enough to remember when I went to school, the music program within the school was a big deal. The arts were a big deal. And the thing that I find now is a lot of that is kind of going away. Unless you specifically go to a school that is dedicated to the arts, it's kind of going away, at least to the degree that it used to be. And the thing is, it's showing now within the music industry as well. It's beginning to suffer because of that. Because it's not that these people that are coming out now, the artists that are coming out now, aren't talented. It's just that where you would have an artist who would come out, or she would come out, and they would have more than one talent, so to speak. Nowadays, you have somebody who can sing, perhaps, because you also have auto-tune, which I could get into that, but I choose not to raise my blood pressure today. But you could have somebody who can have their voice altered with auto-tune, and you don't really see a lot of people who do more than one thing. Nor do you see a lot of bands coming out where there's more than one piece. The only ones that you see that do this still, to a certain degree, are bands that come out who are rock bands. But rock bands have always been that way because, I mean, obviously you have your guitars and you have your drums. So there's always going to be, in a rock band, generally speaking, you're always going to have at least 3 to 4 members because that's just the way it is. But that used to be the thing as far as R&B groups and pop groups and that too, where you actually had people playing instruments within the band, but that's kind of gone away. And that's, to me, when people ask me, well, why is it that you tend to gravitate towards older music? It's not that I have a bias against newer music, because I don't. Because there is some good stuff that comes out. However, that's what makes me gravitate towards older music. It's not so much that the singers are better, although in some cases they are, but it's just the fact that I've always been a fan of not only the vocals, but to the backgrounds too, the instrumental, the production value, etc. And you don't get that in a lot of this music now. This is why when you do get an artist who comes out who kind of harkens back to that time where either they're writing their own material or they're playing an instrument or something like that. If you ever notice, when an artist comes out like that now, they're hailed as a big thing. When once upon a time, these artists who are hailed as a big thing now would have just been one of many people doing that thing. But because it's so rare now, when you get an artist who comes out who doesn't use auto-tune, or who actually plays an instrument or writes their music or whatever, or doesn't just talk about the same old thing that everybody talks about, now all of a sudden they're looked at as, oh my god, this person's revolutionary. And that's why for me, like a band like Cameo, for instance, I really enjoy it. And it's funny too, because ironically enough, maybe not so with their 1990 on releases, but from their 80s releases and 70s releases, there's a lot of music there that is sampled by today's artists. And it's not just the vocals that are being sampled or being remade or whatever, but it's also the background, because that's huge. I digress. I just wanted to talk about Cameo today, and that got me talking about the way music used to be. And we can have a conversation about that another day. We'll save that for another podcast. But anyway, I wanted to talk about them a little bit today. And moving forward, I think we're going to go with this kind of format where I'm going to do a bit of a reading where I talk about the group, whichever group that I talk about. And I'm going to give their history, and then I'm going to give my take on the band. I enjoyed doing it this way. I hope that you've enjoyed listening. We're going to be back soon with more episodes. So once again, I'm DJ Dell 523. Thank you for listening to my dynamic music podcast, and I'll see you next time.